what is stress doing in our bodies at sort of, and you can delve into as geeky of biochemical mechanisms or neurological mechanisms as you'd like here, but what's going on that's actually causing the stupid, slow, and sick effect?
Yeah. So the reason why the human body reacts to stress in the way that it does is that it's designed to prepare for predatory attacks. So if you want to really understand it, we got to go back in time a few thousand years. Let's say we're hunting and gathering in the woods. Saber-toothed tiger jumps out with the intent to kill. Well, first thing that's going to happen is that your digestion will flood with acid because we got to shut down digestion because it's wasting too much of our energy if we need that energy to fight or flee the tiger. That same acid will then seep onto your skin so that you don't taste very good if you get bitten into by that tiger. Just like, I think Dr. Gundry is really talking about how plants will release chemicals when they are like eaten or killed. Like everything wants to survive, right? So the skin becomes acidic so you don't taste very good if the tiger bites into you. That's actually what causes the premature aging, is that acidity on the skin. It breaks down skin elasticity. Your bladder and bowels will evacuate so that you can be light on your feet. This is what the nervous poos are before we have big presentations to make, or we get really stressed. Your immune system will go to the back burner because who cares if you're going to get cancer if you're about to be killed by a tiger. Your adrenaline levels increase, your cortisol levels increase. And I don't love teaching from fear tactics, but if people want to freak themselves out, just have a quick Google search about what adrenaline and cortisol are doing to you. Now, as I'm sure you have shared many times, it's not bad for you to get stressed. It's terrible for us to stay stressed. And you actually introduced me to this concept of hormesis, right? Of this acute short-term stress that actually is good for the body. And so that's why I'm saying it's not bad for you to get stressed, to do a high intensity interval workout, great. But this chronic low grade fight or flight is killing us. Harvard Medical School is saying that stress is responsible for 90% of all doctors' visits. And people are calling it the black plague of our century. And that's because this series of chemical reactions is very good for you. It's very useful if your demands are predatory attacks. But if your demands are in-laws or kids or being an entrepreneur or deadlines or red-eye flights, then this fight or flight thing has become maladaptive, and it's actually disallowing us from performing at the top of our game. It is disallowing us from being fully present, fully here, and allowing all of our hormonal functions, endocrine functions, immune functions to go as nature intended, because we're basically just taxing the brain and body. It's like having a bunch of open windows running old, irrelevant programs on your computer. You're not going to have all of the energy that you need for the task at hand. So this is what I'm saying. This is what I mean when I say stress is making us stupid, sick, and slow.
I'm not good at the whole internet windows thing. I have like 90 internet windows on my browser right now.
I am known to do a lot myself, but if you were to get to like, say 200 or 300, and it were to slow you down and you were typing an email and the cursor was 20 spaces behind, you would probably go in and shut down some of those windows.
Yes.
And the thing is that by the time the average American is 20 years old, we have approximately 10 million open windows on our brain machine. They're called premature cognitive commitments, or PCCs. And all those open, old, stressy windows are slowing us down from the now. It's why we pick up our phone and we're like, why did I pick up my phone? It's why you read a chapter of a book. You're like, what did I even just read? Or you're at a cocktail party having a conversation with someone, and then you realize, like, I don't even know what you just said because I was busy checking out everyone else at the party. And so what we do with the meditation is that, yes, we go in and we give the body some deep healing rest. It's able to close down those old irrelevant windows, get us out of that fight or flight mode. And then we have more energy, more presence for the task at hand. And it's that very phenomenon that allows us to accomplish more in less time.
Yeah. I'll share a related little breakthrough that I had just very recently. Meditation, I agree, is 100% is huge for that and sort of getting out of that brain mode. But if I took my camera right over here next to where you're seeing me right now, I have like this big whiteboard on the wall now, and it's like a productivity technique called Kanban. But anyway, people can Google that if they want. But it basically just, I write down literally like not just today's to-do list, but I write down every task that I have to do like for the next month. And I found that just getting those things out of my head
Mm.
onto paper, external from my brain, is like just this wave of like relief, because I realized how much mental energy is constantly being consumed by just trying to remember constantly all of the things that I have to do. And
Mhm.
it's like dozens of things, you know, it's, as you know, managing a business can be extremely demanding. So I think those people don't realize, and even I didn't realize until very recently, how much mental energy is being consumed constantly by just having those, what did you call them? Precognitive,
Yeah, premature cognitive commitments, which
premature cognitive.
yeah, premature, which it might be a little bit different than like an open loop, but we
Okay.
can chat about that. But that's amazing. What's it called? Kanban?
Kanban. I think it's a Japanese word. It's Kanban.
Okay.
It's not like super well known. It's not as well known as like getting things done, the
Mhm.
GTD method. But I've found, just for me, like you write things down on Post-it notes and you move them from sort of your like potential tasks you can do to the in progress and then to the completed.
Mm.
And like just the physical movement of a task externally from like potential to I'm choosing to work on this at this moment today, to I've finished with this. Like
Mm.
it's I found it's really nice for the brain. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. I just thought that was somewhat related.
Yeah. And so when you start your workday, do you move the things, you move the Post-its into like, this is what I'm going to do today?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the tricks is that you're not allowed to have more than two things at any given time in the doing column.
Ooh.
So it forces you to like stay focused on no more than two things.
And is that for men and women? Because
No, it's only
I,
for men. Sorry.
no, I'm serious. I'm not, it's actually a real question because, I feel like the male and female brain, and I know this is a bit of a gender stereotype, and I know we're living in an age of gender fluidity, but if we look at like biological evolution, men were typically hunters and women were gatherers. And so I actually think that women are better suited to multipreneurship and what I would call like a simultaneity of consciousness,
Did you say
whereas
multipreneurship?
I did.
Are you just making up words on this podcast right now?
I can't say that I made that up, but Marie Forleo may have invented that word.
Okay.
It is sort of in the zeitgeist of the female entrepreneur, largely due to Marie Forleo, because
Gotcha.
she calls herself a multipreneur because she was like, I'm in fitness and I'm an author and I'm a coach and I have this B school. And so I think because you're gathering and you're dealing with kids, there is a simultaneity of consciousness happening in your mind
Mhm.
versus that like laser sharp focus that happens when you're hunting prey. And
Yeah,
so I would be interested to know if there's studies done on the male brain versus the female brain there.
that is either really true and amazing or a very elaborate rationalization for multitasking.
I could go either way. I'm happy to be proved one way or the other. If being a parent teaches you anything, it's the humility of when you're right and wrong, and also that you don't know anything.
So the subtitle of your book is called Stress Less, or actually the main title, this
Hmm.
Stress Less, Accomplish More. I remember
Hmm.
talking to you like a year and a half ago when the book was just sort of in the early visions of it. And I think Stress Less, Accomplish More was the subtitle, wasn't it?
Hmm. Yes, it used to be called the M word,
Yeah.
which I liked, but HarperCollins ixnayed that for a lot of reasons. One, they were like, if they don't know you, they don't know meditation, you wouldn't necessarily know to pick that up because it wouldn't be obvious it was about meditation. And also, we didn't want to be confused with the N word. And like the last thing I want to do is be associated with anything that is racist or so.
Or the F word. Yeah. I mean, I think all the expressions that have the blank word in them
Mhm.
have a negative connotation. I could be wrong about that, but I mean,
Well,
N
and
word,
that
F word.
Yeah. But I was okay with that because I think, and this is changing, but I think a lot of people, when they hear the word meditation, they have a visceral, sometimes positive, but oftentimes negative response. Like, I don't have time for that. That's too woo woo. That's not for me. I can't clear my mind. Like, there's so many snap judgments when you hear that word meditation, which is actually why I wanted to call it the M word. Because I was like, look, if you hate meditation, cool. Just try this thing, see how you feel. If
Hmm.
you think you have a meditation practice, cool, just try this, see if it isn't different, see if you don't get more of a return on your investment. And
Right.
so that's why I liked that title. But this one, I think Stress Less, Accomplish More, I like it because the promise is in the title. It's like, hey,
Right.
who doesn't want to stress less? Who doesn't want to accomplish more? And it's really speaking to this idea that stress is ultimately making us stupid. And then the
Right.
subtitle for this one is Meditation for Extraordinary Performance.
Yeah. So I want to come back to this performance and accomplishment
Mm-hmm.
aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've sort of alluded to it, but I want to have you speak to that. I was going to say I want to speak to that, but I want to have you speak to that
I want
more
to have you speak
directly.
to it.
And one of the things that we talked about last time that I think is a very useful concept is this concept of adaptation energy.
Hmm.
And so how does that figure into this picture of meditation and how it relates to performance?
So, adaptation energy, I would define as your ability to adapt to life's demands, right? So, life is giving us a constant stream of decisions to make, a constant stream of changes of expectation. You know, we got on the highway this morning expecting there not to be traffic, and then whoo, change of expectation, a demand, there's traffic. We expected not to oversleep our alarm, but we did, and we woke up late and it burned up a little bit of adaptation energy. We showed up at our job today, we expected not to get fired, but we did, burned up some adaptation energy. You call your partner and you're like, babe, I just got fired from my job. You expected for them to get dinner and maybe a bottle of wine, and instead they broke up with you. Change of expectation
Hmm.
burns up some adaptation energy. So you get home after like the worst day of all time and you pour yourself maybe a glass of water, whiskey or something, and that glass slips out of your hand and breaks on the kitchen floor. Now, at this point, you're going to start crying, screaming at the glass, punching the kitchen wall, running away from the glass, all because you were out of adaptation energy and yet you had another demand. And if that happens, if you're out of adaptation energy and life gives you another demand, then you're going to launch involuntarily into a fight or flight stress reaction, whether you've read Eat, Pray, Love or not, whether you have read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or not. Because we all know how we should be acting. Most of us are not doing that because we don't act in accordance with what we know. We act in accordance with the baseline level of stress in our nervous systems. And so if you engage in a daily discipline of eradicating this backlog of stresses, then you are simultaneously increasing your capacity to adapt. It's like you carve out the stress and then you have a bigger vessel for adaptation energy, which does not mean that bad things won't happen. Okay, it does not mean that your demands go away. It doesn't mean the traffic suddenly disappears or that no one's ever going to die again. Like life is still life, you're still a human, but you have this bigger capacity to more elegantly roll with the punches that life is inevitably going to throw you. And that might seem like a small thing, but it's not. Like you not losing your temper on your kid one night might not be a big deal, but a week of that, a year of that, you have a different life. You have a different relationship with your kid. One day that you didn't freak out when your boss changes your deadline on you might not change your life, but a month of that may change your life. That may be the thing that gives you the raise or gets you the promotion.
Yeah.
One date where you don't freak out and try to prove how awesome you are, that might not change your life, but 4 dates, 10 dates, that might allow you to be more available to meeting your soulmate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you believe in those kinds of things, but so it's basically it's a chain reaction of these series of tiny little moments where we can show up and adapt to what that moment calls for instead of bringing a lifetime of baggage into every single upset.
Like people are like, oh, I'm doing like a Facebook meditation and I'm doing a fighting with my girlfriend meditation and I'm doing a eating Doritos meditation. I'm like, you guys, we can't just call like anything you want meditation. Like
yeah, it's confusing, right? I mean, there's very like categorically different practices that are all being lumped under this one semantic umbrella. So how do you kind of piece things out and differentiate things there?
Yeah, so good question. So mindfulness, I would define as anytime you're directing your focus. So a guided visualization, probably any of the meditation apps you have is actually mindfulness or visualization. Anytime you're counting your breaths or visualizing your chakras, anytime you're directing your focus, I would put that under the category of mindfulness. And in that, a very small part of the brain lights up very, very bright. And actually, mindfulness is derivative of styles of meditation that were originally made from monks. Right now, then there's the meditation, and the way I think about it at Ziva with our technique, we use Mindfulness is the appetizer, meditation is the main course, and manifesting is the dessert. So most of what people learn when they come to me is meditation. And how I would define meditation is when you're accessing a verifiable fourth state of consciousness. So different than waking, sleeping, or dreaming. And we know that it's different because if you hook your brain up to an EEG machine, in waking, sleeping, and dreaming states of consciousness, the right and left hemispheres of the brain are functioning separately from each other, versus in meditation, all of the leads of EEG rise and fall in unison. Which is cool because that it is that simultaneity, it is that expansiveness, it is actually a surrendering technique. When you do that, you are increasing your neuroplasticity because the whole brain lights up, whereas mindfulness, a small part of the brain lights up but very bright. In meditation, the whole brain lights up. So it's like you're pulling the lens of your awareness back, and you're increasing neuroplasticity, and you're also giving your body rest that is 5 times deeper than sleep.
Wow.
And that's not an insignificant point because, as we all know, if you give the body the rest that it needs, it knows how to heal itself. Now, one of the things that it heals itself from is stress. Less stress you have in your body, better able you are to perform at the top of your game. So to further differentiate these things, the way I think about it is that mindfulness is really good at dealing with your stress in the right now. Like, I'm stressed right now, so I'll listen to like 10 minutes of this app and I'll feel better in the right now. It's like taking an aspirin, right? I have a headache right now, I take some aspirin, I feel better in the right now. Great, useful, glad it exists. Meditation is actually getting rid of your stress from your past. It's going in, it's cleaning out all of that stress that we have stored in our cellular memory and even our epigenetic memory from all the stress that we have from our past. So that's really like a Cliff's Notes version of the difference between the two. And then we have what I consider to be the dessert of the Ziva technique, which is manifesting, which is really just making shit happen in your life. It's like it's consciously creating a life you love versus just reacting to and being a victim to your life circumstances. It's going in and saying like, okay, now that I've tapped this source energy, what do I actually want to do on this planet? Like, you understand, it's like being a creator versus a victim, and
Right.
just direct your focus.
Yeah. So how does that piece tie into meditation and mindfulness?
Well, you could manifest even without meditating or without mindfulness. It's just a lot more powerful if you do. Like, to me, you meditate so that you can access source energy, so that you can get rid of a lot of your old fear and old stress, so that you're manifesting from at least a place of neutrality, if not like supercharging. Like, to me, meditation supercharges your manifesting practice. And if you are manifesting, like, I recommend that people do it right after they meditate. So it's twofold. Like, the most practical one is that you do your afternoon meditation and it feels like a supercharged power nap sitting up. And because you're giving your body rest that's 5 times deeper than sleep, in a 15 or 20-minute meditation, you've given yourself the equivalent of about an hour to an hour and a half nap without the sleep hangover. Because when you're meditating, your brain doesn't flood with sleep chemicals, which are good and useful, but you're flooding your brain with bliss chemicals, which are dopamine and serotonin, which are alkaline in nature. So this can have an anti-aging effect. You feel more awake and refreshed on the other side. And because you've de-excited your nervous system, you've gotten rid of some of that old stress from the past, which is basically making you stupid. Like, stress makes you stupid, and there's no way around that. Like, yes, there's such a thing as good stress, but I'm not talking about like a cryotherapy or like a sauna. That's good stress.
Sure.
I'm talking about the chronic stress that most of us are under and have been for decades. So that's what I'm talking about. When you meditate, you're getting rid of that so that you have more computing power for the task at hand. So to really simplify it, 2 things happen when you meditate. 1, you're more awake on the other side, and 2, you have less stress in your body so that you have more energy to execute on the task at hand.
Beautiful. Well, I think my audience generally appreciates things that will give them more energy. So I think the point is well taken, that if you're getting rest that is 5 times more powerful than sleep, that's a pretty powerful method. And there's actually, just as a quick aside, there's actually quite a number of studies that have tested various meditation and mindfulness methods specifically in people with chronic fatigue syndrome. And it's actually proven that it does work to significantly boost energy levels.
Great.
So just as an aside on a little, kind of niche in the scientific literature that connects to this.
See those studies. And I mean, I can tell you just anecdotally, I have about 7,000 students now. And so a decent percentage of those are dealing with some sort of, chronic fatigue. And, they report that, my body's healing more quickly. I have more energy. My sleep is better. because that stress also, it not only makes you stupid, it gives you insomnia, and it decreases the quality of your sleep. So because most of us are using sleep as a time for stress release. So if you start to use the meditation as a time for stress release, then your body can actually use sleep as a time for sleep. So your sleep becomes more efficient and your body's able to regenerate more while you are sleeping.
That's a really nice distinction. I've never heard that. I like that. I might take that from you. I'll make sure to credit you. So you mentioned, you kind of alluded to some of the neuroscience around stress and how stress affects us. I would love if you could just kind of elaborate on what that neuroscience is all about. How does stress affect our brain and I guess the rest of our body?
Yeah. So to understand why the human body reacts to stress in the way that it does, we really have to cut back in time a few thousand years and say we're hunting and gathering in the woods and saber-toothed tiger jumps out at us with the intent to kill. Body's going to launch into a series of chemical reactions. First thing that will happen is that our digestion will flood with acid to shut down digestion because it takes so much energy to digest our food. That's why we all fall asleep after Thanksgiving. I mean, in addition to the tryptophan, there's also just your body's tired from digesting so much food. So that shuts down almost immediately because you need all hands on deck to fight or flee this tiger. Now that same acid, though, that can lead to, IBS, that can lead to acid reflux, that can lead to indigestion and even skin disorders, because then what happens is that acid seeps onto your skin so that you don't taste very good if that tiger bites into you. So even like acne, psoriasis, rashes, a lot of that can come from too much heat or inflammation from that acid on your skin. Then your bladder and bowels evacuate so that you can be light on your feet so that you can fight or flee the tiger. So the nervous poos that people get before they have big presentations to make, usually that is the body trying to protect you. The immune system goes to the back burner because who cares if you're going to get cancer if you're about to be killed by a tiger, right? Like those long-term healing capabilities become tertiary at best if your body thinks it's immediately threatened. Then your adrenaline levels increase and your cortisol levels increase. And, I don't really like freaking people out, but if you want to freak yourself out, just have like a quick Google search about what cortisol is doing to the body. It's not cute. It's infertility, erectile dysfunction, premature aging, balding, belly fat. Like it's not good for us. I guess it's good for us. It's good for you if you're trying to outrun a tiger or if you need to lift a car off your baby. Super useful. But if your demands are in-laws or red-eye flights or deadlines or emails, then this fight or flight stress reaction has become maladaptive and it's now disallowing us from performing at the top of our game. And so what we do when we meditate is that we're not only going in and clearing out that adrenaline and cortisol, we're replacing it with dopamine and serotonin, which are alkaline in nature. So if you've ever read any studies on like why eating greens is good for you, same gig with meditation. It's making your body more alkaline versus acidic. And that can reverse body age, that can increase your brain plasticity, that can increase your recovery time, it improves your sleep, it improves your sex. And what's a little bit more intangible that we don't have as much neuroscience around, but I can speak to personally and also anecdotally from my 7,000 students, is that you start to be in flow state more. You start to feel more serendipity, more synchronicity. And that sounds a little woo-woo and a little hippy-dippy, but it makes sense that if you're starting to increase neuroplasticity, that means that you're using not only your left brain, which is your critical mind, but you're using your right brain, which is your creative mind. You're not only identified with your left brain individuality, but you're also tapping into this right brain totality. And so it's easier to hear nature when it is speaking to you. It's easier for you to listen to your gut when those ideas come, when the inspiration comes.
Beautiful. So how does, we talked about kind of this fight or flight response, and obviously there's a distinction between when this is happening in the short term, as a beneficial thing in response to that immediate threat versus the chronic long-term aspect of it. How does it relate to things like anxiety, chronic pain, fatigue, and how does meditation kind of, I guess, affect those neural processes, and how does meditation, I guess, relate to things like anxiety and chronic pain and chronic fatigue?
Sure. So I'll address them individually. Anxiety is just another name for stress. So like in India, we just call like all this stuff stress, like anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, PTSD. Like these are all just different names for stress. And that's not to be dismissive of the thing, but I do think that it's important that we start to retrain ourselves to look at these things as symptoms of an underlying imbalance. And the underlying imbalance is a stressed nervous system. And when you start to bring that into balance, then almost all of the symptoms start to fall away. And so anxiety is just kind of another name for stress. You could say that anxiety and depression are two sides of the same coin. Anxiety is reviewing the past and anxiety, people have a tendency to rehearse the future more, whereas depression, people have a tendency to review the past. But in either case, you're in your left brain, whereas when we meditate, we're waking up that right brain, which is in charge of the right now, the right here, right now. And that is where our bliss and fulfillment hang out, right here, right now. And so meditation is not only moving you away from that, but it's moving you towards the present moment. And that's really the mindfulness element. I would call mindfulness the art of bringing your awareness into the present moment, which is always where our bliss and fulfillment hang out. And also when you start flooding your brain with dopamine and serotonin, it's very hard to have anxiety at the same time.